Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to talk to you about 10 books that I would really like to reread. It's really hard to convince myself to make time for rereading when there are so many great new books coming out all of the time. There are so many backlist books I haven't read yet. It almost seems to me, in my head, like a waste of time to reread books. I do my one annual reread of my favorite book every single June, but besides that, I barely ever reread, and I've been wanting to change that for a really long time. I thought it would help for me to make this video to put it out into the universe that yes, there are some books out there that I would very much like to reread, and hopefully by doing this, it will motivate me to actually reread them. The reasons why I want to reread each of these books are pretty much all different from one another, which I thought was really interesting. So not only am I going to share with you what these books are, what they're about, but also why they're a priority for me to reread. First, I really need to reread The Odyssey by Homer. I read this one all the way back in early high school, not just high school, early high school. I'm admittedly lacking in knowledge when it comes to the ancient classics, but I have actually read this one before. However, I read it a very long time ago, and most of the major plot points I simply don't remember anymore because I read it such a long time ago. That alone is a good reason to reread this book, but also because there are a number of Odyssey retellings or Odyssey adjacent works of fiction that I would very much like to pick up, but I feel like I need a refresher before I do that. So this one is definitely the highest priority. Next, I want to give Asunder by Chloe Aridis another try. A while back, I made a video called Books I Still Don't Know How I Feel About, and this book was part of that list because I was obviously still undecided about my feelings. The main character of this book is a guard at an art museum in London, and from what I remember about this book, not a whole lot happens in it. Now, back when I first read this book in 2013, I was a much less experienced reader of fiction, so that definitely got under my skin. But these days, I'm finding myself a whole lot more tolerant of a very sparse plot. I mean, Writers and Lovers by Lily King is one of my favorite books of the year so far, but I remember very distinctly when I sat down to write my review for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I had a realization like, oh, there's not a whole lot of plot in this book, is there? So given that I'm now the kind of reader who can handle very little plot within a novel, and also because I've discovered over the past 2 or 3 years that I have a budding interest in the art world, I have a feeling I might have a very different reaction to this one the second time around. And speaking of Lily King, I also would really like to reread Euphoria. I had the realization in a video I did very early on this year that this is one of the best books I read over the first 5 years that I was on BookTube. This is the story of 3 anthropologists living and working in New Guinea, and it's based on the life of Margaret Mead. I still remember so many lines from this book. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I just want to experience it all over again. A book that's been on my mind a lot recently and actually inspired me to come up with this list and then make this video is Corked Work by Bianca Bosker. I'm pretty sure that's the case because I read Dirt by Bill Buford last month, which is a work of food writing, and for whatever reason, anytime I'm reading food writing or watching anything food related, this book has been coming to mind. But of course, now that I mention that, I'm thinking back and I remember that it actually started earlier than that. I started thinking about this book in early March because when I went to go visit my best friend in Philadelphia before quarantine started, I saw the copy of this book that I had bought her for Christmas one year. She loves wine, and the copy that I bought her had a huge wine stain all over it, which I couldn't even be mad about because it's so appropriate for this book. This book is a really fun look into the author's mission to become a certified sommelier, which basically means a wine expert, in a year's time, which is basically unheard of. It typically takes a very long time to cultivate the skills necessary to become a sommelier. So she basically threw herself into the wine world for a year and did basically nothing else. When I get back into drinking wine, I will absolutely have to pair it with this book. For right now, I am having a craft beer moment, and that is serving me just fine. Love me some craft beer. But in the meantime, if you'd like to hear more about this book, I did a review of it back when I read it for the first time. I will link that for you down in the description box below and up in the cards. But if, while I'm having one of those delicious craft beers, I feel the spontaneous desire to start crying into it, I should definitely start my reread of The Glorious Heresies by Lisa McInerney. You might remember this if you've been watching my channel for a long time, but for a while there, in my monthly TBR videos, I was selecting one book per month by using a random number generator to pick a book off of my existing TBR. That obviously had some mixed results, but this is one of the books that I selected using that method, and it ended up being one of my favorite books of that year. This one won the Women's Prize back in 2016, and in it we follow a cast of characters in Cork, Ireland. The whole book starts off when an older woman accidentally murders an intruder who had broken into her home, and we go from there. We meet characters who are connected back to this crime in different ways, but are also connected to each other in different ways, and eventually you realize how interconnected and also how messed up this community really is. I think about this one all the time. I thought it was so well done, definitely deserving of the Women's Prize, and deserving of a reread. Another work of nonfiction on this list is Sex, Lies, and Handwriting by Michelle Dresbold. This is obviously a book all about handwriting. I have definitely used some of the techniques in this book to do some very amateur reads on the handwriting of basically everyone I know, but it's been a long time, and I would like to brush up on those techniques. I have every faith in her methods, not just because this book is great and definitely worth reading, but also because I got the chance to interview this author in a video I did a very long time ago. What you don't see in that video is that immediately after we wrapped, she analyzed my handwriting, and she read me like a book. So she's the real deal. The next one on this list that I am considering rereading is one that I am much less hyped about, because it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now, if you saw my video I did a while back on the required reading that I had to do in high school, then you will know that I have hated this book ever since I was forced to read it way back when. But seeing as it's been 15 years since I've read this book, and also because I'm pretty sure my hatred has endured because over the years I've heard people call this book a beautiful love story, which it most certainly is not, I am not sure my current perception of this book is entirely accurate. Since I graduated from college, I've been really making an effort to read through all of the Bronte novels. I've read both of Anne's novels. I'm finishing up reading through Charlotte's. And although I've technically read Emily's one novel, I just wouldn't feel right saying I've read through the Brontes without giving Wuthering Heights another try. So I'm not necessarily looking forward to this reread, but I will do it. But one that has actually improved in my mind over time is The Patriot by Sana Krasikov. Now, I'm very picky about my Russian historical fiction, regardless of the form it comes in. I'm very picky. I feel that that's well known by now, but I remember this being a really good take on Russia. The main character of this book is a Jewish girl from New York who decides to move to Russia in the 1930s. So she lives in Russia during Stalin's reign and during World War II. In this book, we bounce back and forth between her story in the past and her son's story in the modern day, because he lives in the United States, but does business in Russia. He's also trying to save his son from a bad situation in the new Russia. I actually reviewed this one here on my channel, and I'm really glad I did so, because I found that anytime I've read a book featuring Stalin since then, I've actually just found myself wishing I was rereading this book instead, because I thought it handled things really excellently. The penultimate book on this list is Lexicon by Max Barry, and the reason I would like to reread this book is that I am not at all convinced that I fully understood this book the first time I read it. This is an extremely brainy science fiction book that's based around language. In the book, students are recruited into an exclusive and secretive school in which they're taught to wield words like weapons. Some words are so powerful that they can be used as bombs to destroy everything in their path. This book gets really intense, and it's also really fast-paced, and that on top of the fact that the subject matter is pretty demanding of the reader meant that by the end of the book, I felt like I was on a runaway train, and I'm not sure I fully grasped what had happened to me. I would really like to take another stab at this one and see if things are any clearer. And finally, I would like to show you the last book on this list. I would really like to reread The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This author just recently died, which I first found out about when Juan from Just Juan Reader did a really touching tribute to him on his channel. In that video, he talked about this book and he read from this book, and it really reminded me how much I loved this book and how much I would like to experience it all over again. But I was also reminded after watching Juan's video that this book is only the first out of 4 total books in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series. I actually own the second one in that series, The Angel's Game. I've just never read it. While I do remember the events of this book very clearly, it is a very memorable book. I would like to experience it all over again, and I would like to get myself in the headspace to take on the rest of the books in this series, finally. So those are the books that I am specifically planning to reread. Some of these I'm hoping to pick up sooner than others, possibly as soon as next month. If you have read any of these books, if you've heard of any of them, or if you would now like to read them after hearing me speak about them, you can let me know in the comment section below. Or if you'd prefer to reach out to me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.